My name is Rena Hall. I'm 33 years old, and in that moment I understood what it meant to disappear while standing in full view. We don't need a tour guide, my cousin Blake says. She just Googles everything anyway. Laughter ripples from the long table. Too loud. Too easy. I don't say a word, I don't even blink. We're standing in the reception hall of the Arlington Memorial Center, the air thick with polished wood and old brass. It's a reunion for my grandfather's military retirement, one of those rare full family events they insist are formal but treat like high school. Blake's voice carries. He knows it. He wants it to. He's seated at the far end of the table beside his father, my Uncle Dennis. They're both in pressed suits, laughing like they earned them. My mother turns her face toward her wine glass. My brother grins into his phone. My aunt doesn't look at me at all. No one says my name, except the woman 3 seats down. She turns, squints. Her hand pauses on her napkin. Then, across the room, a man in Army service uniform steps through the far door. Silver eagle on his chest. Starched, confident, searching. His eyes meet mine. He straightens and lifts his hand. And then the pianist stops mid-chord. I don't move. The key's echo floats across the chandeliered silence, brushing against the edges of the room like a draft no one will name. My uncle's laugh hangs half-formed in the air. My brother blinks, phone still raised. Even Blake, smug in his corner, tilts his head with that familiar half-smirk, the one he's worn since we were kids, and he realized he'd never have to try as hard as I did. They don't know who he is. They don't know what a colonel's eagle means, or why a man like that would cross a room in full dress just to face me. But they felt it. Everyone did. Still, I don't return the gesture. Not yet. Because I know what comes next. The pause. The flurry of fake grace. The scramble to reframe. To backtrack. I've seen it before at conferences, hearings, diplomatic tables, where I was always the translator, never the name they printed on the folder. But I don't give them a way out. Not this time. My mother clears her throat. Blake was just joking, Brenna. He didn't mean anything. I nod once. It's enough to make her retreat. The colonel, no, the brigadier, now waits by the double doors. He doesn't speak. Just stands. It's deliberate. Respect, not rank. And it burns through the oxygen like a torch held under glass. Excuse me, I say quietly, pushing back my chair. I walk past the table, past the white linens and overfilled plates and untouched name cards. No one stops me. No one knows what to say. Not even Blake. Outside, the evening air is cooler than expected. The wind off the Potomac is gentle but firm, like a language you only understand if you've stood in enough foreign sun to feel its difference. The brigadier falls into step beside me. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. We reach the edge of the lot before I glance up. Thank you, I say. He gives a small nod. Some debts aren't owed. Only honored. I inhale, slow, steady. He knows what happened inside. Word travels quickly in those circles, even faster when the names in the room think they're the only ones that matter. Will you be needing a car? He asks. I shake my head. I already called one. He nods again, then pauses. You didn't correct them. No, I say. I didn't. A pause. Why not? I look out across the line of dusk shadows pooling beneath the flagpoles. They weren't asking. Back inside, the clinking has resumed. My mother will say I was rude to leave. Blake will say I overreacted. My uncle will pretend he didn't hear the comment at all. And by morning, it'll be as if I never stood up, as if no one noticed. But someone did, and someone always does. 9 languages, years of service, 10 deployments, 6 covert briefings that changed the course of 2 treaties. I've done it all behind the scenes. I've walked quietly through fire and never asked for a thing but silence. And for most of my life, I believed that meant they'd eventually see me. I know better now. There's a rhythm to being invisible. You get used to listening more than speaking, to sitting close to power but never being mistaken for it, to being introduced by roles not name. She helps with translation. She's on the admin team. She's just the cultural attaché. Each phrase carved away a little more of what I actually was. Director, operator, envoy, but never out loud. because quiet competence is both a shield and a muzzle. The car pulls up headlights soft against the brick entrance. The driver gets out, nods silently, and opens the back door. I don't look back. Not at the building, not at the family table, not even at the door where I once stood small. Instead, I slide in, settle my hands in my lap, and whisper one word to myself. Enough. Not angry, not broken, just clear. And in that moment, in the space between insult and answer, something inside me resets. Tomorrow they'll forget. Tomorrow they'll pretend it never happened. But tonight, a brigadier saluted me, and no one will ever laugh the same way again. I think the moment I knew I was truly on the outside was when I saw the photo. It was posted quietly without fanfare on Beth's Facebook. A family gathering soft smiles, clasped hands the porch of Grandma's old house behind them like a shrine. They all wore blue like someone had coordinated it. Jillian Landon, Aunt Margie, Uncle Ross, even the younger cousins I barely knew. Everyone but me. There was an empty chair in the front row, a little floral cushion that used to be Grandma's. I don't know if it was symbolic or just forgotten, but something in my chest went tight. No tag, no invite. No message, just a photo where I was never meant to exist. That was 2 months after they held Grandma's funeral without telling me. I hadn't even known she passed until I got a letter from the bank about the estate. Beth had told me earlier that Grandma was stable and resting. I guess she meant resting in peace. It wasn't just the funeral. They'd slowly erased me long before that through silence, through neglect, through the kind of subtle cruelty that doesn't raise alarms but bruises all the same. Group chats without me, family updates that never reached my inbox, private jokes that used to include me before I earned my second master's and apparently outgrew their version of normal. Landon once laughed at a holiday dinner and said Rena's collecting degrees like Pokemon cards. Too bad she can't use them to buy a personality. Everyone had laughed, including Grandma. I'd smiled because that's what you do when your blood turns on you. You smile so they don't know you're bleeding. What hurt wasn't the words themselves, but the weight they carried, that no matter how many classified projects I worked on, or how fluently I translated military codes in 4 dialects, or how many high-level advisors asked for me by name, my own family saw me as extra, an accessory. Someone who talked weird, lived quiet, and worked for the government in a way that made them roll their eyes. They never asked what I did. I think part of them didn't want to know. Knowing would mean facing that the girl they mocked in high school who spent lunch breaks in the library had grown into someone whose clearance level was above anything they could even imagine. So they ignored it, or laughed at it, or erased me from photos. At one point, I tried to explain to Beth what my work entailed. It's kind of like risk prediction, I said gently, but at a global scale. I feed language and behavioral data into modeling systems that help identify threats before they escalate. Oh God, she interrupted, laughing into her wine. Rena, you sound like you're describing a sci-fi movie. Just say you work in IT. And that was that. From that moment, I stopped explaining. From that moment, I started shrinking in the family's eyes until I was a ghost. An overeducated, over-serious, invisible ghost. When they split Grandma's belongings, no one asked what I wanted. Not even her journals, even though she and I had once traded letters every week while I was stationed abroad. I heard Jillian gave them to her daughter to use for school art projects. What did I get? Silence. A silence loud enough to split bone. I thought maybe Mom would say something, but she just told me, "You've always had your own path, sweetie. You were never really into family stuff anyway." That was her excuse, her out. But I had been into family. I remembered staying up with Grandma as a child, helping her shell peas and talk about old songs from the war. I remembered teaching Landon how to write his first school paper. I remembered making photo scrapbooks for Beth's wedding. I had been into family, until they stopped being into me. After a while, you start to believe them, that you're too intense, too strange, too much. I'd sit in my government-issued housing at night, just me and the hum of the encrypted router, and I'd wonder if I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone in my family even notice? I started working longer hours, not because they needed me to, but because the silence at home was heavier than the threat models on my screen. At least in my work, someone listened. At least their silence meant something strategic, not neglect. Once, while decoding a metadata pattern from intercepted chatter, I paused and thought I just helped stop a weapons trade network from escalating into regional conflict. And somewhere in Ohio, my cousin thinks I'm making PowerPoints for the Pentagon. It would have been laughable if it hadn't stung so much. The deeper wound wasn't their disdain. It was their dismissal. They didn't hate me. They didn't even care enough to hate. They just didn't see me. Not really. It's strange realizing you've become invisible to the people who once knew your bedtime story favorites. But that invisibility gave me something they couldn't take away: clarity. If I was going to be alone, I'd be strong in it. If they wouldn't give me a seat at their table, I'd build my own coded, shielded, and secured by clearance-level protocol. So I leaned in, deeper. I stopped trying to belong. I stopped waiting for an invitation. Instead, I prepared, quietly, ruthlessly. With every case file I compiled and every cross-linguistic anomaly I flagged, I became more irreplaceable to the people who actually mattered, the ones who made world-altering decisions and needed someone who didn't flinch at 3 a.m. threats or encrypted calls from embassies. I wasn't just a woman with 2 MS degrees. I was a force behind the curtain, and I was just getting started. There's something particularly cruel about being forgotten by people who should know you best. I didn't expect parades. I didn't need applause. But I did think my own blood would acknowledge I existed. It started small, skipped phone calls, conversations I wasn't part of, group texts where my name was never tagged. Jillian Beth Landon, they were the core of every family event now. I had become the "oh right, Rena" afterthought. Then came the day I wasn't even invited to Grandma Louise's funeral. No one told me she had passed. Not one person. I found out through a photo Beth posted online captioned 3 generations strong. "We carry your legacy, Grandma." In the photo, they were all there dressed in black, arm in arm. A perfect little tableau of unity. Everyone. Except me. I stared at it for 10 minutes, then 20. Trying to understand. Was this deliberate an oversight? But how could they forget me? I'd been at Grandma's bedside through her last heart surgery. I was the one who got her that speech-to-text device when her throat weakened. I was the one who mailed her holiday cards from whatever base or outpost I was on. I was her favorite. She told me that with a smirk once, like it was our little secret. And now, they'd buried her. And deleted me. I don't know how long I sat on the edge of my hotel bed that night staring at that image. My dress blues were still hanging on the rack. I had worn them earlier that day for a classified briefing in Arlington. While my relatives were lowering Grandma into the ground, I had been helping decode intercepted messages between 2 rogue actors in Eastern Europe. Both events were heavy, but only one made my hands shake with rage. I didn't confront them. I couldn't. There was no point. Because if they could go that far in pretending I didn't exist, then there was nothing left to salvage. That funeral photo became my wall, and from behind that wall, I watched more photos come in. Birthday dinners I wasn't invited to. Family barbecues where they posted, "So good to be all together again." Beth even got engaged. I found out through a TikTok reel. I didn't even know she had a boyfriend. The worst came when I visited home one winter. I had a 2-week leave unplanned between projects and decided naively that maybe things had cooled down. Maybe time had made room for something gentler. I stopped by my mother's house unannounced. She opened the door with that tight smile that meant she was trying. Behind her, the living room was full laughter music, clinking glasses. They were throwing a birthday dinner. For Landon. My name was nowhere on the guest list. He looked up when I stepped in. The room went quiet for a half-beat, just long enough for my ears to ring. Then Beth said, "Oh, hey, Rena," like I was the Amazon delivery girl. I stayed for 8 minutes. Didn't eat, didn't sit, didn't make a scene. Landon said something about being surprised I was still in the service with all the AI doing things now. Beth made a joke about how I must have a 6th sense for awkward timing. I just nodded. Said happy birthday, then I left. In the car, I sat with the engine running, headlights casting long shadows across the snow-covered driveway. I remember my hand trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. Not from cold. I had trained officers to resist interrogation. I had translated emergency signals in dialects only a dozen people in the world understood. I had seen things burn, people lie, treaties fracture in real time. But this felt personal in a way nothing else ever had. That was when I stopped reaching out, not from bitterness, but from clarity. I wasn't part of their version of the family anymore, and maybe that was okay, because I wasn't built for brunches and baby showers. I was built for pressure, precision, and purpose. The next 6 months, I dove into my work like oxygen, took on Black Ops briefings, helped design a multi-language deconfliction protocol between Allied commanders, worked with NATO liaisons on AI-enhanced pattern recognition for hostile intent tracking. I saw the inside of secure rooms and the edge of war rooms, and I felt something return, something they'd never seen in me because they never looked hard enough. Strength. It didn't come from applause, or posts, or place settings at someone else's table. It came from knowing that while they deleted me from their story, I had quietly built one of my own. And it mattered. I didn't cry when they excluded me from Grandma's funeral. I didn't cry when they sold her house and divvied up the heirlooms without a word to me. But the family photo did it. There it was, framed glossy, proudly hung in Aunt Beth's hallway. All of them in black, standing around Grandma's casket. Even Jillian had flown back from Boston. Even the cousins' kids were there. Landon had a hand on Beth's shoulder like some kind of family anchor. But I wasn't in the picture. I hadn't even known the service had happened. No call, no text, no email, nothing. I had been in D.C. that week, not deployed, not out of reach. I would have flown back in a heartbeat. I loved Grandma. She was the only one who ever told me, "You're not too much, Rena. You're just right for somewhere bigger." But they didn't tell me, because in their eyes, I wasn't part of we. I was her. Her job is weird. She's always off doing something secret. Bet she made all that education stuff up. Can't even keep a boyfriend. She's too cold. They didn't say it to my face. But they didn't have to. I found out about the funeral through a tagged post on Jillian's profile. Her caption read, "We said goodbye together. Grandma would have loved the service. Family is everything." I stared at the word together until it blurred. I wasn't even angry. I was past that. I felt hollow. I didn't confront them. What would be the point? They'd just say it was an oversight, that they didn't have time, that my line was disconnected. It wasn't. They'd laugh it off or say, "Oh, I thought someone else told you." So I swallowed it down. I went back to work, back to operations that spanned 4 time zones and 3 languages. I spent 2 weeks embedded with a joint NATO-AFRICOM team decoding cross-signal intercepts and false flag chatter. And not once did I talk about the funeral. But something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly, just a quiet locking of a door. That summer, I visited home. I was on brief leave 2 weeks. It was rare for me. I hadn't been home in nearly 2 years. They were having a big gathering at Aunt Beth's, a pool party for the kids' grill on the patio, even a bounce house in the backyard. I showed up quietly in jeans and a navy polo. No heels, no insignia, no need. The moment I stepped onto the deck, conversation dipped. Only slightly, but I noticed. Beth smiled tight. "Well, look who finally made time for us." Jillian handed me a soda without looking me in the eye. Landon gave me a stiff nod and turned back to the grill. No one mentioned the funeral. No one said, "We missed you," not even a fake apology. Instead, someone whispered, "I still don't know who." Didn't know she was still in the country. I stood there smiling like it didn't sting. Like I wasn't used to weapons-grade misdirection but still hadn't built up armor against family apathy. Inside the photo was still on the hallway wall. Grandma, the family, no me. I walked past it in silence. I didn't need to look at it anymore. It had already burned its shape into my memory. Later that night, I sat out on the porch swing while the party wound down. The kids were inside watching a movie. The adults were half drunk and gossiping near the fire pit. Landon walked out and sat on the other end of the swing. He didn't say anything at first, just looked out at the dark yard. Then he said quietly, "You weren't supposed to see the photo." I said nothing. He added, "Beth said it'd be better if you didn't come. She thought it'd be too tense." Still, I said nothing. He shifted, frustrated. Look, you're doing your own thing. We didn't think you'd care. You're always off saving the world or whatever. We didn't think you'd want to be part of this anymore." I turned to him. My voice came out calm low. "I didn't ask to be different. I just didn't stop learning, didn't stop showing up to things that mattered. You all stopped showing up for me." He rubbed his jaw. "I guess we just don't get you anymore." And that was it, wasn't it? They didn't understand me. And so instead of asking, they erased me. When I left the next morning, no one hugged me goodbye. Beth waved from the kitchen window. I drove away with nothing but a small tote and a storm inside me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was finished. Finished trying to be seen. Finished explaining why what I did mattered. They had drawn the line. And finally, I stepped back and let it stay. But lines are funny things. They can box you in or mark the start of something else entirely. Something they weren't ready for. I wasn't looking for payback. I wasn't even looking for recognition. But something was already in motion, quiet, powerful, and headed straight to their doorstep. And this time, they wouldn't be able to pretend I didn't exist. I stopped trying to explain what I did. They didn't want to understand. Not really. At first, I used to bring slideshows of the NGO field missions I led, interpreting urgent negotiations in unstable regions, translating sensitive documents for diplomats sitting in emergency tents with linguists bridging silent gaps between terrified civilians and uniformed forces. But to my Aunt Brenda, it was travel stuff. To my Uncle Dean, it was volunteering. And to my cousin Ellis, the one who once failed freshman French twice, it was cute. I realized the room was too small for what I carried. So I stopped. I started sending in reports, not explanations. Updates, not justifications. To the people who actually read them, the people who wore uniforms, who signed classified clearance forms, who moved with quiet weight in rooms without applause. I became strategic in silence. Let them mock me at family barbecues. Let Ellis call me Rosetta Stone behind my back. He wasn't clever enough to realize that was a compliment. Let Aunt Brenda ask if I ever wanted a real job, as if earning under contract with NATO linguistics divisions and Eastern European security councils wasn't real. Let them. Because slowly they faded from my center of gravity, and someone else stepped in. It began with a quiet email from a name I didn't recognize, but the domain was unmistakable. amod.uk. There was a flagged need for high-clearance interpreters, someone who could navigate not just languages, but cultural protocols in zones too delicate for headlines. They'd read a summary I wrote, an off-the-record report I translated from a rural Slavic dialect few outsiders even knew existed. Apparently, my version helped prevent a spiraling misfire between two commanders with completely different codes of honor. It had been background work, a job done well and left unsigned, but someone had noticed. Someone important. They didn't invite me to a ceremony. There was no parade, just a transfer of documents, a background check that left no stone unturned, and a seat at a very long, very cold table. And one phrase whispered from the mouth of a woman in uniform with stripes I couldn't count fast enough. "We've been watching your work. Quiet saves lives." That's when it hit me. I didn't need my family's pride, because I had earned something rarer, respect. And not the kind spoken with champagne toasts or graduation cards. The kind that came from the pause in a brigadier's breath before he looked me in the eye. I started saying no to every family trip after that. No, I won't fly to the beach house this year. No, I'm not free for the annual ski photo shoot. No, Brenda, I won't fly back just to pop in on your wine and book club. I watched my own detachment grow. But strangely, it didn't feel like bitterness. It felt like clarity, like I was no longer trying to fix a cracked window that refused to shut. Instead, I was building my own house somewhere quieter, stronger, with steel beams no one could see. I worked missions no one knew existed. I held the silence between hostile leaders as sacred. I spoke just enough to de-escalate, just enough to protect, just enough to signal she's not just an interpreter. She's the difference between fire and frost. It changed something inside me. I wasn't just surviving their laughter anymore. I was outgrowing it. But then, the wedding. I didn't want to go. I almost didn't. It was Ellis's younger sister getting married, the one who once told me while curling her lashes in a hotel mirror that I should loosen up and date an investment banker. They insisted I come, just show up, one day, for family. And something inside me said, good, let them see. One last time. Not in defiance, not for revenge, but for the record. Let them see who I really became, even if they wouldn't recognize it, even if they laughed again. They had no idea who else would walk into that wedding, but I did, because someone else had been watching me too. The church smelled like hydrangeas and hairspray. I stood near the back pew, silent, scanning the crowd, not searching for anyone, just settling myself. Everyone else had already taken their seats, rows of lace and satin and expensive perfume, cousins in tailored suits, aunts comparing brands of tinted moisturizer, laughter too loud for a sacred space, cameras clicking like it was an influencer's photo shoot. I hadn't been home in over 2 years, and yet nothing had changed. Ellis was near the altar, grinning with practiced charm, still wearing arrogance like cologne. Aunt Brenda was fussing with the bride's veil. Uncle Dean stood with a drink already in his hand. It wasn't even noon. I kept my posture quiet, my dress simple, neutral colors, no fuss. But I knew who I was, and that was more than enough. A few heads turned as I walked up the side aisle, careful not to disturb the procession. Just a ghost of movement. Most didn't recognize me until I reached the second pew. Then Ellis looked over and froze. He blinked like he'd seen a shadow out of place. His smirk flickered. I nodded politely. No smile, no words. Then Aunt Brenda saw me. "Oh, you came?" she said, eyebrows rising like I'd broken an unspoken rule. "I said I would," I replied simply. She looked me up and down. "Well, you're dressed modestly." And just like that, it began. Another round of soft attacks wrapped in family sweetness. I sat beside her listening without really listening while she leaned over and said, "I do hope you've found something more stable by now." She meant job, career, marriage, something she could explain to her book club. I didn't answer, because just then I felt it, the shift in the room, the kind you can't describe, but every trained ear hears, even before the door opens, even before the boots hit the floor. You feel it, the stillness, the weight, a hush that rolls in like fog. It started at the back. Some people turned their heads. Then more. A ripple moving through the room. A few guests stood up out of instinct, unsure why. Then the doors opened, and he walked in, full formal dress, decorated, clean, unapologetic. Brigadier Martin Atwell, commanding officer of the Joint Linguistic Recon Unit, a man who had spoken less than 50 words to me in 3 years, but every one of them had mattered. His boots didn't echo, they landed. He didn't scan the room. He walked with purpose, eyes forward. And when he reached the row where I sat, he stopped, right in front of Aunt Brenda, in front of Ellis, in front of all of them. Then he turned, not to the bride, not to the groom, to me. And he saluted, sharp, perfect, not casual, not polite, the kind of salute that said, "We don't play games where I come from." My breath caught in my chest. I returned it slowly, eyes steady. Nothing theatrical, just steady. Aunt Brenda's face had gone pale. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Ellis blinked again, the smugness gone completely. His lips parted in confusion. The brigadier lowered his salute and said just loud enough for the first 2 rows to hear "Ma'am." "We're honored you made time for this." Then he stepped aside, took a seat behind me, and said nothing else. No one knew what to do. The ceremony went on, but the air never recovered. People kept glancing at me, whispering. I caught snippets. "Who is she again? Did he say, 'Ma'am, is she military? I thought she did something with schools?'" They didn't know. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want to explain. I let the silence say what it needed to. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't lean over and whisper anything clever to Brenda or shoot Ellis a smug look. I just sat there, still, grounded, fluent in silence, because the loudest message had already been delivered, not by me, but by someone they couldn't ignore. After the ceremony, Ellis tried to recover. "Hey," he said, pulling me aside near the exit. "Did you, serve or something?" I tilted my head. "Something like that?" He laughed too loudly, clearly rattled. "Man, the way he saluted you like you were some kind of general." I just smiled gently. "Maybe I am." I walked away before he could respond. That night, I got a message from the Brigadier. Just one line. "Your silence today spoke volumes. We're deploying again soon. The team would prefer you lead." I looked out my hotel window. The world below looked small. I closed my laptop and whispered to no one, "Let them laugh. I'm done translating small minds." I don't know when the silence began. Maybe it was the second Brigadier General Sayer stepped toward me and gave that slow, crisp salute, the kind that made even the air pause. Or maybe it was earlier, when my cousin's laughter cracked just a little, when Landon took one step back, when Aunt Camille dropped her wine glass and whispered, "What? Who is she?" But in the quiet that followed his words, "Ma'am, the minister awaits your debrief." No one moved. No one dared. I felt every eye on me. My uncle's mouth parted like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. My mother gripped the back of her chair with white knuckles, trying to remain upright. She looked almost afraid. And my cousins, the ones who spent years calling me a language nerd who mimicked my French or Arabic with childish mockery. They just stared, like I was someone entirely new, but I wasn't. I was exactly the same woman they dismissed. I just wasn't hiding anymore. I gave the Brigadier a nod. "Understood, sir." He stepped aside, allowing me to walk ahead of him, not behind, not beside. Ahead, the way the hallway cleared as I passed. You'd think I was royalty, but it wasn't about power. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth finally being too big to ignore. The SUV was still waiting out front, matte black and humming low, 2 more officers standing at the ready. I could feel my family peering through the windows behind me, but I didn't turn. I opened the door, paused, and finally looked back. Just once. I didn't say a word, didn't need to, because the last thing they saw of me, the quiet girl they once called a translator with delusions, was me stepping into a vehicle summoned by a minister. The doors closed. Silence again. Inside the SUV, the Brigadier handed me a folder. Top secret, eyes only, but his voice was gentle. He didn't want anyone else on this. I blinked at him. This referred to a diplomatic extraction across 3 countries, a mission so linguistically complex it required live decoding in Swahili, Urdu, and Pashto, sometimes within minutes of each other. Apparently, the minister had said only one name. Mine. "You sure they're ready for someone like me?" I asked, a soft smile tugging at my lips. He chuckled. "Oh, they're not. But we are." And for the first time, I believed it. 3 days later, I stood at a marble podium in Brussels. Behind me, the flags of 6 nations. In front of me, 27 delegates and their interpreters. I wasn't speaking for family anymore. Not trying to explain who I was or beg them to listen. I was representing. Because when the NATO subcommittee opened their Emergency Language Intelligence Unit, they named it after the first successful multi-region decode operation led by a civilian advisor. They named it the Hall Initiative. I didn't tell anyone back home. I didn't need to. Because the next time they looked up my name, it would no longer be as the weird cousin who memorized Mongolian. It would be Hall Rena Civilian Linguistic Strategist, classified operative, trusted by command. And if they didn't understand what that meant, that was fine. I spoke 9 languages. Not one of them was apology.